a lot of people know that they need better boundaries at work, but they just don't like what happens when they start setting them. They know they say yes too quickly. They know they over-accommodate. They know they make life harder for themselves by being too available, too flexible, or too easy to lean on. But they still hesitate. Why? Because setting boundaries often makes you look difficult at first. And that's the part people don't like talking about. Why? Because they prefer the cleaner version. You set a boundary, feel empowered, people respect it, everything adjusts nicely. And sometimes that happens, but not all the time. And quite often, why doesn't that happen? Because the first boundary does create friction. And because boundaries change the arrangement, that creates discomfort. And if people were benefiting from the old arrangement, they may not like that change and they will not welcome it. That doesn't mean your boundary is wrong. It just means, and often means, the boundary is real. This is one of the harder parts of becoming more professional at work. You realize that being easygoing is not always the same as being healthy. It's not going to happen. Sometimes it just means you've trained people to expect access, flexibility, emotional labor, or extra effort from you without much resistance. So, when you stop doing that, it can look like as if you're the one creating the problem. And you're like, no, hold on a minute, I'm not creating the problem. You're not creating the problem. You're exposing one that was already there. And that matters. Because a lot of people do the interpretation of pushback as proof they've handled the boundary badly. And sometimes the pushback is simply proof that the old setup suited other people more than it suited you. And that's why boundaries feel uncomfortable at first. Not because they're unprofessional, but because they interrupt something. And what's that interruption? And people notice the interruption before they notice the improvement. So for example, if you're the person that always says yes, always stays late, always picks up the extra work, always replies quickly, the moment you become more measured, someone may call you less helpful. And not because you've suddenly changed completely, but because you're no longer endlessly convenient. And that's the big difference. And yes, there's usually a brief period where people react as if your new boundary is shocking administrative development. But it's not, is it? As if saying, I can do this by Thursday, not today, means you've rewritten the Constitution. But this is where professional maturity matters. You have to decide. If your job is to prevent all discomfort around you, or to work in a way that is sustainable and self-respecting. Those are not always the same thing. So, if this is resonating with you, comment below with the boundary you find hardest to hold at work. Because most people aren't struggling with the idea of boundaries. What they're struggling is with the reaction of them. A boundary doesn't change your behavior. It changes what other people can expect from you. And those expectations are social. If people are used to you being endlessly accommodating, even a reasonable boundary can look like a personality change. But often it's simpler than that. It's not a personality change. You're no longer bending over backwards. And that matters. Because a lot of people aren't just being helpful. They're bending over backwards so often that they start disappearing from their own personal life. And that's not a strong long-term strategy. It leads to fatigue, frustration, and blurred professional lines. And then people wonder why they feel overextended or quietly taken for granted. So usually it's because they've been overgiving without enough structure. So what does a healthy boundary actually look like? usually it looks calmer than people expect. It's not dramatic, it's not a speech, it's not a performance. It's something like, I can do that, but not by today. I am not available for that until tomorrow, or look at my schedule. Today I've got a full schedule. I can help with this part, but not take the whole thing. I need more notice next time. So those would be examples. Clear, respectful, and steady. And that's the goal. Not to punish people, but to clarify reality. And yes, sometimes that will still annoy some people, but that doesn't automatically mean you were wrong. Sometimes it just means that the boundary doesn't suit them. And that's an important lesson, especially if you're someone who is thoughtful, conscious, and sensitive to other people's reactions. You can be kind and still have limits. You can be professional and still say no. And you can be cooperative without becoming endlessly absorbent. That's what stronger boundaries make possible. And once you get past the first phase, the awkwardness, the resistance, the sense that people prefer the old version of you, something else happens. And people adjust. They learn what to expect, they take your time more seriously, they stop assuming you're available for everything, and your professional presence becomes clearer. That's the longer game. And so yes, setting boundaries can make you look difficult at first, but often what it really makes you is clearer. And clear people are easier to respect than endlessly accommodating people who are quietly running on fumes. So if you want to become more respected, more grounded, and become a professional self-leader and work with me in the mentorship, you will find the link below.